Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell signaling to President Trump that he won't play a leading role in crafting a new health care bill. This after President Trump pledged to essentially do away with Obamacare and says Republicans can become the, quote, party of health care. McConnell saying, quote, I look forward to seeing what the president is proposing and what he can work out with the speaker. I am focusing on stopping the Democrats' Medicare for None scheme. Let's bring in Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Judith Miller. She's a Fox News contributor. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Mike.
Are there any signs of a bipartisan push to fix the health care system?
None that has any chance of really winning congressional approval, which is what makes the president's proposals so incredibly mystifying, even apparently to Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is up for re-election along with 32 other senators, 22 of whom happen to be Republicans. And he knows that this is going to be a difficult haul in which Republicans are going to be vulnerable. And he doesn't understand, I believe, why the president is insisting on doubling down on a proposal that went down in flames the last time and helped give the Democrats in the House a majority. So I think that what Mitch McConnell is signaling is his warning to the president that this may not go as well as the president intends.
Yeah, we saw Republicans had the ability to address a repeal, but not so much the replace component. Would it take the Supreme Court declaring Obamacare unconstitutional to get lawmakers from both parties really focused on a solution?
It might, but it might have exactly the opposite effect. If Democrats can blame the Republicans and the Trump administration for eliminating a program which is very popular with Americans, 55% of Americans say they want Obamacare continued and improved. They don't want it eliminated.
Right.
That will give the Democrats an enormous gift in the upcoming election. So there's a lot of exposure and vulnerability here for the Republicans and not a lot to be gained. Because with a Democratic House, a majority of Democrats in the House, you are not likely to get anything that cuts back or eliminates the benefits that now exist under Obamacare. So it's truly, truly mystifying, Mike. You know, last week should have been a great week for the president. He had the Mueller Commission report exonerate him, at least on the Russian collusion front. He had Michael Avenatti's charges,
right,
now making him potentially criminal. And he also had the override fail of his veto of the declaration of emergency on the border. He should have taken a victory lap. Instead, he goes and proposes something that he had promised in his original campaign that he's not likely to be able to deliver on. It's truly mystifying.
A Kaiser Family Foundation poll, let's put it up on the screen, shows support among Democrats dropping in terms of improving the Affordable Care Act and jumping to pass Medicare for all. What do you make of that?
Well, I think Medicare for All is enormously popular with Americans. 70% of Americans say they like the idea until you begin to explain to Americans how much it would cost,
right,
and that it really means a single-payer system. And then support for this proposal plummets. And that's what Republicans wanted to do. They wanted to be on the offense. They wanted to say, this Democratic proposal is insane. It will limit your benefits. And now they're being asked to support something that they don't even know what it is. You know, they say in the South, there ain't a lot of punch in the second kick of that mule. And that looks like what's going on now and what the president is asking Mitch McConnell to embrace and the Republicans to embrace. I truly find it surprising and mystifying. And if I were a Republican, I'd find it frightening.
As we've seen, almost all Republicans seem to support repeal Obamacare, but they struggled with a replacement. Here's House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy this week on health care reform.
What you see from the Republicans is that we want health care to cost less. We want people to have a greater relationship, and we want to protect pre-existing conditions. What the Democrats have moved on to now is Medicare for All, that would remove hundreds of millions of Americans from their ability to have the health care because they could no longer have private health insurance.
How critical will it be for President Trump to be firmly behind a particular plan to win over some GOP members?
Well, he's going to have to be behind whatever the three senators with whom he's consulting come up with. I mean, Senators Barroso and Rick Scott of Florida. But the problem here is that anything they come up with is not likely to be acceptable to Speaker Pelosi in the House.
Right.
And anything that even Speaker Pelosi and Donald Trump agree on is not likely to be acceptable to a lot of the Republicans in the Senate. So I don't see the deal that is to be done here.
Big 2020 campaign issue. Once again, Judith Miller, thanks for your time.
Joining me now is GDP Advisors President and healthcare expert Seth Denson. Seth, this sounds like Granny off the cliff time again.
It does. I mean, listen, this is an old playbook that the Democrats will point to, right? I mean, I've heard this type of statement before, and I think that that's what Bernie Sanders is playing into. As you alluded to, Liz, President Trump hasn't rolled out specifics to his plan. He is doing some things about bringing transparency into the system, which is actually going to drive down the cost of health care, unlike the ACA, which really was just impacting the finance system.
You know, Seth, President Trump has relayed and tweeted about what Democrat studies and Democrat analysts have admitted, that the cost of Obamacare has been going up. Here's the president tweeting, it's far too high for our citizens. The deductibles in many cases way over $7,000, makes it almost worthless or useless. Seth, what is the Republicans' plan?
Well, listen, what the Trump administration has already started doing is laying out groundwork under Alex Azar and infusing transparency into the system, targeting prescription drugs. These are the things that are really driving the cost of health care. The Affordable Care Act focused on insurance, and most Americans think about health care and insurance in the same manner, but one is just the credit card. So we need to drive down the cost of the goods of services, and if we do that, the insurance in turn, that will come down too.
You know, whenever the new government plan is rolled out, fraud immediately steps in. That's what happened with Medicare, Medicaid. Look at this, Social Security, tens of millions of benefit checks mailed to dead people. That's what's happening.
Yeah,
Seth.
I think that this is just more proof of why we don't want the federal government running a system, and specifically in health care. I mean, if we can't even keep track of money to people that aren't living anymore, what are we going to do about when we're trying to deliver health care as a federal government as well?
Yeah, we looked at Medicaid abusers. They are people living with Bentleys, Rolls Royces, Ferraris we saw mansions, we saw vacation homes, people ripping off the Medicaid system to the tune of $141 billion. That's what Chuck Grassley and his colleagues are saying. What do you think, Seth?
You know, it's really sad. I think that we need a better checks and balance system in these federal programs to make sure that the funds of the taxpayers are being used efficiently and effectively.
President Trump continuing his effort to dismantle Obamacare, tweeting out earlier, quote, "The cost of Obamacare is far too high for our great citizens. The deductibles, in many cases, way over $7,000, make it almost worthless or unusable. Good things are going to happen." Fox News medical correspondent Dr. Mark Siegel joins us now. He's author of a new op-ed in The Hill entitled "Obamacare is Broken and We Should Fix It." So, Dr. Siegel, how do we fix it?
By the way, the president's right about those deductibles. I mean, you come into the doctor's office with a $7,000 deductible, you get no care whatsoever,
Absolutely.
and you can't afford to pay out of pocket.
So how do we fix it?
Well, one thing that's not going to happen, it is not going to be repealed. I predict that statute law and severability clauses and the fact that it's an entitlement, I don't think we should fantasize that it's going to go to the Supreme Court and be repealed. But here's the good news. With the individual mandate gone, you no longer get forced into a system where you have to buy an insurance with a high premium that's heavily subsidized by the government for something you're never going to need because you're not a smoker or because you don't have a chronic illness. So that whole idea of roping people in to pay for other people didn't work, and 6 million people a year took the tax penalty. Getting rid of that opens the door to more variety of decisions, more choice in the system, association plans, across state lines plans, church-driven plans, skinny plans, which have been mocked by the Democrats, but shouldn't be, because someone that's in good health and is younger, we want them in the insurance
The catastrophic insurance
Right, we want
policies.
them in the insurance pool, and we want the government to feel responsible for catastrophic, absolutely.
But, I mean, it's still going to be Obamacare, right? There's only a few choices in the developed world that people do. You have state health care, or you have a single-payer health care, or you have this, you know, sort of a government push into insurance plans, which is what this is. We could say Obamacare is terrible in terms of the cost, but it's really the health care that's costly. I predict this becomes a NAFTA, we do some tweaks to it from Republicans, give the thing a new name, suddenly there's red state buy-in, everyone loves it, and the thing becomes a success. Crazy talk?
I don't agree, Jack, because I do think the mandate was holding the whole thing together. That was one of the legs of the three-legged stool. That's gone now. By the way, the other reason we need more creative solutions is we got innovation. We've got immunotherapies that are precision-based. For one person they work, they don't work for another. Personalized health care. We need creative solutions on how to pay for that. The one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. So the government, as you say, can try to ram you into this insurance plan that doesn't work for you, but you don't have anything to force you in anymore.
So Dr. Siegel, the one-size-fits-all thing is totally not the right thing. Talking to Governor Huckabee this morning, he was really advocating block grants to the states because the state requirement in a state like Mississippi could be very different from New York. You don't include that in your op-ed today. Is that something that you advocate for or not?
I'm on the fence about that. You're talking about Medicaid block grants, and I like Governor Huckabee's point. I'm more interested when it comes to Medicaid in this issue of work requirements that Medicaid czar Seema Verma has been pushing. Because if you're able-bodied and you're under that Medicaid expansion, which is very popular in the rural states, why shouldn't you be doing community service or educating towards a job? The idea is the Medicaid roles can shrink if you actually end up working. That's such a great idea, and I'm very disturbed that in Arkansas it's being contested legally. So block grants will work if Governor Huckabee's right. I do think states should have more control over it. That part I agree with.
So, Dr. Siegel, you're talking about these innovative solutions. Now, one thing that I'm excited about or hopeful for is how J.P. Morgan, Berkshire Hathaway, and Amazon announced they were banding together to find some great solutions in the private health insurance arena. We haven't heard a lot about that. Well, what's your thoughts on what they might bring to the table?
You know, I actually absolutely love that, Michael, and I love another thing you didn't bring up, which is Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit is doing this, direct care models, where you cut out the middleman. Obviously, it's going to bring down costs. You have a huge array of health care like you do at Henry Ford. I'm not advertising for it. I have no connection with Henry Ford's system. But there's 6 hospitals in place there. You have all of these providers, and you have patients that can get care directly because they're employers. That's got to cost less than having that insurer that's skimming off the top or that pharmacy benefit manager. The thing has its own pharmacy system.
Well, let me just point out really quickly, also, you have the distributors who have had this really big fat business model. They're under pressure now. Maybe that's a good thing.
I think it is a good thing because they have to justify what they're doing. And by the way, price transparency plays into that. If we know what things cost, we're going to find out who's really bilking the system and who isn't.
Dr. Siegel, this is Gary Kaltbaum. There is a problem with your ideas. They're too logical, and with government there is no logic that comes from them. Imagine competitiveness through the states where they actually have to bid for your business. We don't have that right now. I tried to get something different. I couldn't find any other insurance. What do you think? Going forward, you have the left right now saying, hey, let's just do government everything. How are you able to fight that as we move forward towards the election, because it's going to be all about the political?
Gary, that's a great way to phrase it. Number one, Medicare fits all is so ridiculous because it's not Medicare, for number one. It's just diluted insurance. They tried to bite the thing too deeply, and they bid into the employer-based healthcare system, which has 170 million people covered. They're going to fall on their sword with that. So that's number one. Number two, I like the point that when Medicare sets something up, the private sector follows suit. I like what Secretary Azar is doing with price transparency, with choice, and I think that may infiltrate the private sector more. If we know what we're paying for, maybe we'll have more competition.
Doctor, there's one, we've got to do this quickly. There's one government program that seems to be working. One, and that's Medicare Advantage, where you put as little distance between the provider and the receiver of the health care as possible so that the patient gets to see what he wants, what is most cost-effective for him. Is there any way to expand that to the general population?
I completely agree with that, David, and that Medicare Advantage model is what HHS is trying to expand to Part D. To Medicare Part D with drug pricing and even some Part B. And it works because everybody makes money with Medicare Advantage, including the insurers love Medicare Advantage. And you're right, the patient gets choice. Choice is key here.
It is.
And choice is key, and Medicare Advantage gives you choice.
Yep. They say it's unlike any other product on the market, but it is a product.
It works.
All right.